Hi, North Albany Community Church. Thanks for being a part of our 5-minute Bible study today as we continue to look at men and women of the Bible, who we can look at their successes and their failures and hope to duplicate the goods and throw out the bads. We're going to be looking at Joseph, the son of Jacob and Rachel in the book of Genesis. Joseph was a favored son of Jacob. He was the 11th boy born for a long time. He was the youngest until his baby brother Benjamin came along years later. But he was favored and everybody knew it. Dad would dote on him for sure and made him a coat of many colors, as we know. But not only that, I think it added to who Joseph was as a young boy and in his early teens. He would often talk about himself, and I think arrogantly so. And so he had to learn some humility, but he would go out and tell his brothers who he was and who God made him to be. In fact, he had 2 dreams that he shared with his brothers and his mom and dad. And those 2 involved all of them bowing down to him. So if you can only imagine, I'm sure that didn't stick well with his older brothers, his mom and his dad, and they rebuked him for it. You know, the Bible says explicitly that they were jealous of him. In fact, they said that they hated him and they couldn't even speak a kind word to Joseph. I can only imagine that Joseph was a real pill to be around. Probably talked about himself a lot. Have you ever had people like that in your life? They tend to just prop themselves up and talk about themselves. They always one-up your conversation. They're hard to love. Maybe you have one in your life now, and they're a real Joseph. But you know, through all this, Joseph, I think, had to learn some humility before God could use him. So you know how the story goes. Joseph is sold into slavery and to another country as these marauding slave owners came and bought Joseph from this pit that his brothers threw him into and took him all the way to Egypt. We don't know how long these slave owners had Joseph, but the story goes is that Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, bought Joseph. And the interesting thing is when he did that, the Bible says that he prospered, that Joseph prospered in this environment, and that the Lord was with him, and he gave him success in everything he did. Just seemed like Joseph had a lot of people looking out for him, and the biggest thing is the Lord was looking out for him. So he was probably in his late teens at this point when he enters Potiphar's house. The Bible says that Potiphar didn't concern himself for any of his house, save for one thing, as you know. Don't mess with my wife, Joseph. Joseph says, not a problem. The only problem was Potiphar's wife had it in for Joseph. The Bible says that Joseph was a pretty good looking guy. And I'm sure he was attractive too, because he was a guy who had some integrity, and I think growing integrity. He had some character with him. And day after day, the Bible says that she pursued him and wanted to seduce him. And he said no. And here's where I think Joseph makes a mistake. The Bible says that one day when this happened, there was no one around. And she pursued him, and he said no and left his cloak in her hand. And then she accused him of wrongdoing. Could it be that, backing up from that, Joseph could have noticed that they were the only ones there? Just the 2 of them alone. He knew she had it in for him. Could he have not demanded that there be somebody else there so that they could not be alone? Guys, if you're listening to this in particular, be careful that you're not in a place alone with another woman. There's not a time when you don't want to have your integrity lessened by an accusation, nor sully that woman's reputation. But yet Joseph, in that point, maybe it was his youth at this point, not realizing what had happened, but he did get accused and got thrown in jail. And as the story goes, he was in jail, and God let him use his gifts of interpreting dreams and elevated him to second in command of all of Egypt, saving not only Egypt, but many countries around as the famine consumed the land. So what can we learn from this? Folks, we have to be careful of kind of propping ourselves up, don't we? Careful of how we talk about ourselves. And then secondly, our integrity needs to be of utmost in one of our character qualities. That's what we can learn from Joseph. Thanks again for watching, church, and we'll see you again soon.